unsanctioned mission to interdict traffic to and from North Korea in violation of sanctions. That's an entirely appropriate thing for the Australian Navy to be doing, and indeed we do with other partners in the region. It was not only not in China's territorial waters, it wasn't even in China's exclusive economic zone, and so it appears to be way out of the bounds of behaviour from the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force.
Okay, and what do you want the government to do now?
We think the government needs to be extremely robust here because this is now a pattern of behaviour, and despite the talk of a stabilising relationship, the Chinese military is taking this dangerous actions which put the lives of Australian personnel at risk. We saw this incident a few years ago. There was an incident where chaff was released into the flight path of an Australian Air Force jet. We saw a lasing incident in RFUSC in our own region. These are incredibly dangerous things, and the government's been describing them as unprofessional. I don't think unprofessional cuts it. This is far worse than unprofessional because it's done with malign intent. It's done with intent to intimidate. It's done with intent to coerce, and we shouldn't tolerate that. We want the Prime Minister to raise this at the highest levels, to use what he claims to be a good relationship with Xi Jinping to make representations on behalf of our country and our service personnel.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Shadow Home Affairs Minister James Patterson. You're listening to Breakfast. David Crowe, Chief Political Correspondent with the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Hi, David.
Good morning, Patricia.
So the Reserve Bank has held rates, but we're not out of the woods yet. The Treasurer just told me, he and the Reserve Bank Governor are singing from the same song sheet, that his budget is very much aimed around dealing with inflation. But this is really difficult for the government now, isn't it?
I think it's really challenging after the RBA Governor's remarks yesterday, which were she hopes that she doesn't have to increase interest rates, but having said that, if we have to, we will. And that's very different language from what people have been accustomed to in recent months. It was only earlier this year that people thought there was a very strong chance of a rate cut toward the end of this year. And now that we're looking at a very different scenario with people assuming rate cuts possibly next year, and now we don't have a rate increase ruled out. So the government's got to be very careful in next week's budget. The focus is all going to be on the spending. There are many initiatives. There's the Future Made in Australia and so forth. There's going to be energy bill relief. But there is this concern about the weight of spending and whether the government then gets blamed for fueling inflation. So that big major setting on the spending is going to be fundamental. It's possible that the energy bill relief could be structured in a way that looks like it's going to reduce prices in that energy space. So that's going to be really important. But it's the weight of money in household budgets that's also going to be the focus.
A Senate inquiry report into the government's controversial immigration bill has been released. The Coalition is recommending extensive amendments, and the Greens are completely opposed to the bill. I thought that James Patterson was interesting there. So basically they want oversight and they're concerned about diaspora communities. I do feel like we're in upside down world.
The government is going hard with a very tough line on this new power to turn away people, basically reject visa applications from entire nations and give that power to the minister in law. I mean, the minister's already got huge discretion over these sorts of decisions. So, the new power has got to be seen in that context. But we're looking now at a debate where the Senate does play this kind of role. It says, look, here are the checks and balances that are necessary to make this bill work. And that's the message that the Coalition is sending. With more checks and balances, they can support this bill. The Greens, of course, say that it's a terrible bill. The Asylum Seeker group is totally opposed to it. So the government's got a problem on its left flank, if you like. But here they've got possible room to move with getting an agreement with the Coalition to get this through.
In the last minute we have together, Jim Chalmers revealed two things in that interview. One is that tax reform will be delivered in this budget, although don't expect negative gearing reform, he says, or changes. And also housing will be a centrepiece.
I found it very interesting that he listed he didn't list them. He said 7 housing policies worth $25 billion. And so he's talking up the scale of the government's action in that space. I think some of the housing programs from the government have been very slow to develop, but they have given money to the states to develop housing, so watch for more. And on tax, I thought that basically goes into the Future Made in Australia. We're talking about tax incentives for investment. The structure of those we don't know yet, but it's very clear now.
Yes, it is. David, thank you.
Thanks, Patricia.
David Crowe, Chief Political Correspondent for the Sydney Morning Herald and The ABC RM Broadcasting News, Australia's Privacy Commission has launched the program. It's 8 o'clock.
ABC News with Matt Coleman. The driver has been taken to hospital after crashing their car into a bogey pole on Glen Osmond Road at Eastwood. The crash happened just after 6 o'clock this morning and has caused a power outage in the area. Senior Constable Kimberly Broad says a section of the busy main road has been shut as a result.
Glen Osmond Road is closed to traffic in both directions between Green Hill Road and Fullerton Road, so traffic's obviously already banking up, and so we're asking motorists to avoid Glen Osmond Road if possible and take an alternative route into the city this morning.
The parents of Perth brothers Jake and Callum Robinson say it's time to bring their sons back home after they were murdered in Mexico. Correspondent Carrington Clark reports from Baja, California.
Speaking from a beach in San Diego and standing next to husband Martin, Deborah Robinson said their lives have been upended by the loss of their son.
Our hearts are broken, and the world has become a darker place for us.
Callum and Jake Robinson were murdered along with their friend Carter Rose last week while on an excursion trip in Mexico. The three men, all in their early 30s, had been camping on a remote beach in Baja, California, and investigators say they were killed for the tires on their ute. One Mexican national is due to appear in court tomorrow. He's expected to be charged with the three murders.
Experts who attended Canberra crisis talks on missing and murdered women say governments must have to give violence response services ongoing funding certainty if they're serious about dealing with the problem. Political reporter Claudia Longhouse more from Parliament House.
Advocates, peace bodies and frontline services say they're facing funding cliffs and uncertain financial futures unless governments around the country act to change that. Executive Director of the National Women's Safety Alliance, Kathryn Panama, says it places some enormous pressure on the sector.
There is never going to be a perfect time to change policy, invest more. We've just got to do it. We've got to make a decision that women's lives in Australia mean enough.
Advocates told the ABC next week's federal budget provides an opportunity for the government to follow through on their commitment to end violence against women. Their question is, will they take it?
Donald Trump's lawyers have begun cross-examining adult film star Stormy Daniels in court in New York. Emily Clemens reports.
The former US president is on trial charged with falsifying business records to cover up payments to Stormy Daniels to bury her story about an alleged sexual liaison. Ms. Daniels told the court she had sex with Mr. Trump in 2006 and later agreed to a payment of $130,000 US dollars to be fired. Trump denies being held in this place. Lawyers have grilled Ms. Daniels on the stand asking if she embellished her story. Court is finished for the day and the cross-examination will resume later this week.
The greyhound industry reform inspector has been appointed by the state government 4 months after an inquiry into the industry. Former Victorian Racing Integrity Commissioner Cal Turner has been given the role of overseeing the industry as it attempts to improve its standards in the next 2 years or face being banned. Recommendations of the inquiry included significant changes to animal welfare, integrity and administration, all of which are now being overseen by Mr. Turner. The Sport and Racing Minister Kathryn Panama says the appointment shows that the government is committed to holding the industry to account.
This appointment of Mr. Cal Turner, a person of this calibre, with his background, integrity, is absolutely a vindication of how seriously we are taking the need for this reform.
The levy on waste being sent offshore for recycling will be formally abandoned in next week's federal budget. Political reporter Jack Evans explains.
A charge labelled by the waste sector as a recycling tax was legislated by the Morrison government in 2020 and due to have effect in July. The charge is designed to cover the cost of eliminating the waste Australians send offshore. The industry warned
The lead author of that report joins us shortly. And two students have been expelled from the Yarravalley Grammar School after the friendship breaking between a summit, something labelled as, and I'll quote, unreasonable. The news research stuff will hear from the principal of the Yarravalley Grammar, well, they know this program as well. And it's time for life to be sharing and focus on. Advocates have long called for an overhaul of state privacy laws. How urgent is that task? It's absolutely urgent, both of you, and the work has been ongoing now to understand how to reform the Act for many years. I think we're on about year 7 of the work to understand what those reforms should look like. So the stage is set. I think everybody is ready, including regulated entities, for that change that we're focused on to move forward those reforms. What is the key change the government needs to make? Good question. It spans the breadth of the Privacy Act, but I can certainly highlight a few specific changes that will really change the coverage of privacy protection for the Australian community. The first is that the current privacy regime doesn't capture small businesses, or essentially most businesses in Australia. 95% of Australian businesses aren't complying with privacy legislation. So that will be the first big change. The second is that it introduces a new standard of processing called the Fair and Reasonable test, in which entities who are acquiring data from Australians and using that data will have to be able to establish that it's fair and reasonable to collect and use that data in the way they're doing so. And that's really important because it circumvents the reliance on consent that we've seen in many different parts of the digital economy, whereby individuals just kind of click consent or agree to purchase procedures they don't really understand and which actually lead to harmful privacy practices. The first set of changes relate to children, so there's a lot more protections in the new regime around children, including defining child of anyone under the age of 18 as prohibiting targeting direct marketing to children. And then another set of changes that my relate to individual rights around privacy, so there'll be a new statutory court of privacy introduced in the reform. There's rights to erasure and rights to be indexing on search engines.